Welcome to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast, presented by FantasyGolfBag.com, your number one source for the most in-depth PGA Tour analysis in the daily fantasy and sports betting world. Each week, our experts will discuss everything you need to know, from the course preview and key stats to top plays, fades, and strategies. Whether golf betting, grinding out cash games, or playing for a big GPP win, our team has you covered. Let's get after it.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Red Kachik, joined today by our other counterpart, since you've gotten used to Fantasy Jesus on the podcast, and he is traveling west towards Hawaii. We get a fellow fantasy golf bagger, a familiar voice, JK Ray, ASU. Jacob, welcome back to the podcast, man. How's it going?
It's going good, Drew. Really glad to be back on here. Access certainly does a fine job, but it's nice to drop in from time to time and give my Kisner Takes pre-Twitch live stream.
Yeah, we'll still be doing that. Excited for, since we didn't get to do a show last week, I'm excited to sit down and talk some final thoughts on Wednesday night. For those that are new to the show, we do a Fantasy Golf Bag live stream every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, and you can find that for free at twitch.tv/redkachik. You can also go to the homepage, fantasygolfbag.com, and it's always posted there each Wednesday, and you can watch it live and chat with everybody that's in the chat. So always a good time in there. A good kind of final thoughts to compile and throw out there for ownership, line of construction, stuff like that. That's changed since our podcast. So this week we'll get the full bout of it. We do the podcast and the live stream. So last week, obviously, Euro Tour, Axis and Skylar killed it on the podcast. So appreciate them filling in last week. Giving us some information in Slack as far as the guys to play. Looked like everybody, from what I could tell, had a pretty good week, even with some just terrible debauchery on the weekend, with some guys shooting like 81, 80. Pretty crazy, but that kind of comes with the territory with the European Tour. So I understand you partaked in that last week. What was your thoughts?
I did. I think that was the first time I had played any Euro ever. And it was really interesting, a different feel to it. Obviously, having Axis and Skylar, their knowledge with the Euro Tour certainly helped. I think that was evident by how our community fared throughout the week. And me personally, didn't do that well. I think I got 4 or 6 through, which for first Euro, I'll take that as a win.
Sometimes those weeks cash, man, on the Euro Tour.
Yeah, I know. I would imagine you have the winner in 4 or 6. Probably min cash and end up making your money back at least. But no, it was really interesting. It's crazy to see the score variance. I know this course particularly was very difficult, and it's known to be that way. So some of the scores from day to day, you might otherwise be like, wow, they really, Zanotti shoots a 82 on Sunday. Wow. But the course itself, I think, is set up that way to really test the European Tour's best. So overall, I really enjoyed it, and I will probably find myself dabbling a little bit more in Euro moving forward.
Yeah, the Euro Tour, you get some really interesting scoring. You'll get guys that are studs, and there's not a ton of studs over there. You talk about like Julian Surrey was pretty chalky and paid off. Played pretty well. But, a good majority of those guys is still hit or miss. And a week like last week with guys, again, we're talking about the European Tour, Jordan Smith shot like 7 under the first day, and guys that shot, 3, 4, 5 over par still had a chance to make the cut. Yeah. The scoring was so crazy. 4 over still could make the cut, and 7 under was leading. If that was to happen on the PGA Tour, it would be -7 leading, -2 may be able to shoot -2, -3 tomorrow and make the cut. So pretty crazy. Plus a little bit shorter on the cut. So to give you an idea of that many guys over par having a chance to make the cut with the leaders going so low the first day. So pretty impressive. And Jorge Campillo taking it home on Sunday. I'll give a little shout out to Orange Man in the chat. And he never fails to disappoint with cursing Campillo after about 5 holes. Yet Campillo comes back and he's saying go Campillo, and he ended up cashing pretty good. I think he finished like a top 100 in the Big $10. So I saw a bunch of guys did really well. So congrats. Was it Papa Wolf? I think finished 4th in the $25 or the $20 for $150. So good job there. So overall, pretty exciting. They play almost every week, so excited to now transition back to the PGA Tour. But if you're still interested, I know Axis and Skylar love the Euro Tour. I mean, that's I wouldn't say it's their bread and butter, but whenever it comes up, they encourage us to like, dude, you got to play some Euro. You got to play some Euro. So maybe allocate a little bit of bankroll to playing when it shows up on the schedule. Play a couple lineups in the big GPP and maybe like one single entry. And worst case, it keeps you up to date with some of the European guys when they come back to the States or playing WGCs or the British Open. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that those two guys give the FGB community a serious edge when it comes to Euro, and just having that knowledge of that player base, like you said, when PGA and Euro come together, majors, obviously WGC events, their knowledge in that area, really, you can't beat it. So
yep. All right, let's so I'm not really going to talk about the Zurich last week. I'm not a fan of that event anyways, and with the rain delays and stuff like that, it was really hard to watch or follow. So let's just go ahead and get right into it, man. Let me break down the course real quickly.
Okay.
And we'll get going. Talk about some plays that we're liking here in a pretty stacked field, if I might add. I mean, it's a PGA Tour. It's not very hard to say like it's a loaded field. It's pretty good, but I was pretty impressed to see so many big names playing this week with the PGA Championship right around the corner.
Yeah, obviously, the big name, Tiger Woods pulled out, and I think some people were disappointed with that. My father, especially being the huge Tiger fan that he is not. No, I'll be going to the event on Friday, and really looking forward to checking out some of these guys. And like you said, the field is certainly not a slouch field. Rory's there at the top. Day, the winner last year, just some really good names. I think we're in for a really good tournament. Yeah,
looking forward to it. So I'll go ahead and quickly touch on the golf course. The Wells Fargo Championship. I'm not even sure we said the name of the tournament yet. The Wells Fargo Championship be held at Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a crazy long golf course. It's 7550 par 71. Plays extremely long, a lot of drivers, but it also is some of the most difficult greens to hit, most difficult greens to putt on, and the fairways, depending on how the rough is, makes it very difficult. So I'll go over some of the stats here in just a second, but just a note when looking back through some scores, I think it was 2 years ago they held the PGA Championship here, which most likely played a good bit different than how it'll play this week for this event or any other normal year for the Wells Fargo Championship. But the rough probably is going to be down a little bit this year. Gives those guys a little bit more of an opportunity to hit drivers and have chances to hit the greens. For a PGA Championship, they're usually trying to keep it pretty penal. So keep that in mind if you're going back through prior years. So touching on last year, which was the first year back off of that 2017 PGA Championship, driving accuracy 52%, ranked 6th most difficult on tour. Green and regulation 61%, 10th most difficult on tour last year. Birdie average less than 3 per round, the 5th most difficult on tour last year. So you can see there's a pretty good trend with this golf course being tough from tee to the green and putting. I mean, you're just not going to make a ton of putts. The one thing I did want to point out, just because I brought up the rough aspect, when looking through numbers as far as fairway and rough versus the field and all the other tournaments combined, the rough was actually easier comparative to other PGA Tour events to hit from different yardages than the fairways. And that just shows the point of the greens being so difficult and the rough not being as penal last year. So going through kind of some of the key stats for me, obviously green and regulation. I'm looking at good drives, so I'm looking at guys that hit a lot of fairways, and if they've been missing fairways in the last couple events, they're still hitting green and regulation. So I think Axis calls it like a GIR plus in the rolling report that we have on the Fantasy Golf Bag website. Looking at strokes gained tee to green with an emphasis on strokes gained off the tee. I think off the tee is going to be pretty big this week. And then kind of as a tiebreaker, and I don't use putting so much. Like, I'll eyeball it and I'll look at guys and how they've been trending with the putter. So, there's one guy that we'll talk about here shortly, but, for an example, if a guy's been losing a lot of strokes putting or at least hasn't been gaining any, up and down, like at least, lose strokes putting and then gain one for an event, like that looks okay. But if you're consistently losing strokes putting, this is probably not the week to chase that. It's been proven that this golf course generally is not going to be won by a guy with a bad putter. You can't just show up here and start putting good. So I'll kind of leave it at that as far as what I'm looking at. Again, pretty straightforward. I didn't touch on driving accuracy, but it fell into that good drives as far as the GIR plus. So if you're curious, like, driving accuracy is important, it is. But I'm looking at the bigger aspect of fairways, including greens and regulation.
Okay, so just to clarify, the good drives gained is fairways and green and regulation together?
It's fairways, and if they miss the fairway, they still hit the green. So The reason why I use that on this type of golf course is because we'll say last week's a bad example, but like say in a 3 events prior, a guy was able to hit driver a lot because the golf course was more wide open or the rough was down. He wasn't really focused on hitting a lot of fairways, but he was still in position to hit a lot of greens. It kind of weights the greens like I like, greens and regulation, but adds in the obviously hitting fairways. So there's a very fine line in my perspective of viewing golfers, especially for this golf course. I think that's probably key to mention there is, hitting the fairway is crucial, but if you're missing fairways, by a small margin and still hitting a lot of greens, you're doing fine. If you're missing a bunch of fairways and not hitting greens, then you're going to be pretty far down in my model. So that's an easy way for me to X out some of those less ideal players this week.
Okay. So the only thing that I would add to that is just looking through the sort of hole by hole and running through it in my head from when I was there during the PGA Championship in 2017. Certainly the Green Mile, that name is earned. 16 is a beast. 17 is very, very difficult with water pretty much all front and to the left of the green, and then sort of that iconic 18 with the little creek that runs up the left side.
Such a small creek too, man, and it's so many guys hit it in that.
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
And really, I think what not only is the distance what makes those holes difficult, but the pin placements that they use. And, I'm thinking of the PGA Championship. Certainly they're a little bit more, they want to put more emphasis on those and make it a bit more difficult. But these green complexes, some greens appear big from the fairway, but there are quadrants where you need to be, or else you could be on the green and still 3-putt pretty easily. But with all that being said about the Green Mile, there are stretches throughout the entire 18 that are similarly difficult. To be honest with you, the open and 3-hole stretch, 1, 2, and 3 is not a walk in the park either. I can't tell you how many guys I saw off the tee on 1, Ricky included, Day, guys like that I watched come off the tee, go into the bunker on the left and where it doglegs to the right, and then there's a surprising amount of elevation on this course, and on one especially, you're going down into a small green. One is just under 500 yards for a par 4, so it's a beast in itself. And then 2 is pretty tough, but it's playing about par, and then 3 also just over 480 yards for that one. That one plays over par. So typically in a PGA event, you'll see front 9, back 9 splits. Maybe the back plays easier one day or plays easier over the course of a tournament, but on this course, it's really difficult to find. You need to find holes that you can capitalize on, and the par 5s certainly are the best opportunities to do that. But there are so many tough par 4s that it really puts an emphasis on those key stats that you mentioned. So really, really interesting course layout, difficult course, long course. So again, I think that will contribute to it overall.
Yeah, I think if anything, looking at par 5 scores, like obviously including all the stats to get a well-rounded pool, a player pool, get it narrowed down. But if you're going to also make some leans, the par 5 scoring was the only one of the par 3s, par 4s, par 5s that was under par last year. The par 3s were average 3.17. Par 4s 4.12 and par 5s 4.73, so about a quarter of a shot under par. So you can make a lean to that. Guys, that it kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the stats we talked about. Strokes gained off the tee. If you wanted to add driving distance, that's fine, but I think strokes gained off the tee is a better metric. But that will feed into that par 5 scoring. So I think that's a good point where, I mean, the overall golf course is going to be tough, but if you're really splitting hairs, guys that have scored well in par 5 is going to be a pretty key this week. Like less than 3 birdies around, and the 3 par 5s is basically where you're going to make them.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the player pool, and we'll look at some DK pricing. We'll start in the 10K and up range, and we'll work ourselves down into the 6K range if we can find anybody, because it gets a bit thin. Maybe low 7s and down. It doesn't look appetizing, we'll say that.
For sure. Yeah, I glanced down there briefly. I know me and you had talked about it. There are certainly some guys, just name recognition, that you might look towards, but overall, where we might have a value play down there, for this tournament at least, I don't really see any guys that jump out at me as being confident in, and that's interesting as far as lineup construction goes, because most people will want to try and play a number of these guys in the top range. Rory, Day, Ricky, it's stars and scrubs would seem to be the way to go, but there are no scrubs. So I certainly see merit in fading this top range if you feel that way, and because there are a lot of good choices in the 9s, but certainly we'll get into those.
All right, so kind of looking at the top range, we'll look at the 10K and up. Top of the bat is Rory McIlroy, 11.8, Jason Day, 11,000 even, Ricky Fowler, 10.6, Justin Rose, 10.3, and Hideki Matsuyama at 10.1. A little surprising for me, but what can you do? So for me, it's pretty cut and dry. I think it's hard to steer away from Rory at 11.8. I have a pretty good feeling about him this week with a somewhat disappointing result at the Masters. I think this is a good bounce back for him. Obviously winning back in 2015. I think he won it back in like 2011 or something too, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? 2010,
yes.
Sorry.
2010, yeah.
2010.
Second into, well.
Yep, second 2012.
Yeah.
He's basically finished top 10 every year.
Pretty much.
So I like Rory a ton. His stats grade out really well for me from top to bottom. I mean, looking at good drives gained, green and regulation, he's second in the field. Tee to green first. I mean, it's no surprise for kind of how he started this year that he would be the top of any type of stat model. But in this field, with this golf course, like looking just strictly through the 10K and up, he stands out to me. Like I can probably make an argument against Jason Day. I can make an argument against Ricky Fowler. But Rory stands out to me as the guy that, he's not a must play by any means, but he's the guy I most want to play if I can pay up. The only other one that I have interest in down here is Justin Rose. And coming off a missed cut at the Masters, if you're playing GPPs, I think this is a pretty good pivot off of Rory, who should be pretty popular depending on how people build their lineups. But it always seems like guys gravitate to the most expensive player. Rory McIlroy is a pretty popular name. There's a lot going for him with course history, etc. But Justin Rose has some sneaky course history here as well. He missed the cut at the PGA Championship, but I don't really view this as the same golf course. It's set up completely different. 2014 at this event finished 5th. 2016 finished 3rd. And really had great form coming into this week, or coming into the Masters, where he missed the cut off that terrible Thursday. I'm not afraid to go back to Justin Rose here. I think he's going to be lower owned than he normally would be had he played the Masters and finished, 15th or 12th or something like that. A moderate finish. I like JR. I was going to say JT. Justin Rose, a 10-3. I think that's pretty good savings and gives you a lot of flexibility if, like some of these guys I'll mention here in the 9K range, I like Justin as a pivot off of Rory. I mean, that's $1,500 savings. I think that can go a long way with this type of field.
I like Rose also, but for me, certainly McIlroy in this top group is, I wouldn't say he's far away, sort of the clear what we need to go towards, but his form this year, as you stated, has been pretty stellar, and you can't deny his course history here as well with the 2 wins and all the top 10s. But for me, the 2 guys that I think interest me the most, and I don't think we see this often, but you named the 3 guys that I don't really have a ton of interest in, and the 2 guys that I do were not mentioned, and that's Ricky Fowler and Matsuyama, both of which are certainly salary savers based off of the top and Rory. But I think that, Fowler, he had his sort of maiden PGA victory here back in 2012, and he's already got a win this year, performed well at the Masters. He knows this course. I just think that we're seeing a different Ricky this year. I don't know if it's confidence that's contributing to that. A lot of people want to be on the Ricky bandwagon. Everybody's sort of cheering for him to win a major and all of that narrative. But I think his play this year has just been really, really strong. And at 10-6, I think that is good value for him. Certainly he would need, a top 5 or better probably to pay that off. But I think it's possible in this field. And then Matsuyama at 10-1, I think that he's got some sneaky course history here. He had made the cut, but didn't get through the 3rd day last year, MDF for him. But he did finish 5th at the PGA Championship the year before. And then made the cut all 3 times prior to that in 2014, 15, and 16. He had a 20th in 2015 and 11th in 2016. Also, to the Matsuyama end, his form really throughout the entirety of this season so far has been excellent. His highest finish was a 33rd at the Arnold Palmer. Everything, outside of that event, he's, finished 32nd in the Masters, and then everything below that was a T25 or better. So really, some really solid form. As we all know with Matsuyama, it's the putter that will be the bane of his existence. And, hopefully Bermuda will be kind to him this year. He has shown the ability to score well and to finish well. So I do like Matsuyama at that 10,100 price.
Alrighty. Let's go ahead and fall into the 9K range, and I'll have you continue on and lead off in the 9K range with anybody. It's just a little bit shorter packed list, I guess. 6 guys, or 7 guys. No, 6 guys. I can't count. Go for it. Tell me who you're looking at in the 9K range.
So the 9K range, I think a lot of people are going to gravitate to the same guys here. Certainly Paul Casey, who has excellent course history here. And I think he finished, 5th last year, 13th the year before, 12th the year before. So we're looking at, 3 T13s or better in the last 3 years. I mean, you can't argue with that. Again, he's already had a win on the year at a very, very difficult par 71 course in Valspar. He did miss the cut at the Masters pretty notably, but he's had some time off since then. People might say that's a bad thing, but I do like Casey. I'm fairly certain he'll be one of the chalkier guys, if not the chalkiest in this range. But that's with good reason, certainly. Then Tony Finau just below him. I've certainly got a little bit of interest in, but I think I might run with Mr. Phil Mickelson at 9,100 as my primary guy in this range. And I was reading some articles earlier today about lineup construction where most people might be moving towards the stars and scrubs. And if that's the case, this 9K range in general might get overlooked a bit. So Phil Mickelson, his course history is outrageous. I think overall strokes gained, he leads the field on this course. I think there's actually some more specific numbers with that over a certain period of time. I'm not sure, but I did see that he, I think, is far and above the strokes gained tee to green guy in this field on this course. So I think that coupled with his form coming in, certainly another good year for him. He's looked really solid lately. He'll be able to bomb it away in this one. You know how he likes to hit bombs. And, his finishes, of course, we know that he can finish well. So I do like me some Mickelson at the bottom of the 9K range.
Yeah, I like Mickelson. Looking at, you talk about the 2017 for the PGA and how they set this golf course differently and he missed the cut. With less rough, I like him. I like his chances here, and obviously he likes his chances here, finishing inside the top 11. Looks like 7 of the last 9 years. So I like that quite a bit. You mentioned Casey. I don't think I had the same course history as you. You said he finished 5th, 12th, and then 13th?
Yes.
Yeah. I got him as 5th, 12th, and 41st.
5th, 13th at the PGA Championship, 12th, and then 41st.
Okay, I don't see that, but
oh, okay.
Just looking at the last two, 5th and you could be looking at you could be doubling up on what the 2017 event and the PGA Championship.
That's what I'm looking at. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that event wasn't here. But yeah, I think Paul Casey, kind of that same talk of Justin Rose, is interesting. I'm not afraid to go back to Paul Casey here. So generally speaking, for these elite ball strikers, is a good bounce back spot, especially after a really notable miscut in a major. Again, majors are just a different breed of tournament. He played awful, so there's no excuse around it being a major or not for as bad as he played. I think he had 1 birdie in 2 days, and just awful. I think Sandy Lyle beat him. That's not good. So, yeah, I like Paul Casey, and I like Phil. I think Phil's going to be pretty popular down here. The one guy that stands out to me, and his course history is very up and down, but Tony Finau, I think, is starting to get into form heading into the major championship season. So I really liked what I saw at the Masters. 9,300 for Tony Finau. I think this is a type of golf course where he could really excel at. He hits it long, hits it pretty straight, decent with his irons, and he can putt okay. So Yeah, I like Tony Finau. So really anyone, those three guys there, 9,500, 9,300, 9,100, they stand out to me as not necessarily the best values, but they look like they have the most upside to win this event. A couple guys up there like Sergio Webb-Simpson, I just don't see it. I think Sergio is going to struggle a little bit on these greens. And then the one guy I did want to point out before we kind of move out of this range, I think, I could be wrong, but I think Gary Woodland will get some talk. And because his stats are starting to look good. Everyone talks about, this being a long golf course, hit it straight. He has a couple decent finishes here, but like looking back in 2015 when he finished fourth, he gained like 9.9 strokes putting. And he hasn't gained strokes putting but like one event this entire season. So I'm not, like I said, splitting hairs with guys that can't putt or haven't been putting well. Gary Woodland is off my list, and I think he may get some ownership, just general DFS talk. But
yeah,
I was a bit off-put by how bad his putting has been. So this is one, chalk it up to good ball striking. You can't putt, you're not gonna pay off $9K. You possibly could miss the cut. I mean, that's what a lot of these guys have done here over the years. Tee to green looks great, and then putting awful. So not gonna be playing any Gary Woodland.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you brought him up because I was going to ask you about him. My hope is that he does get talked up, like you're saying. His stats maybe sort of skew it a little bit, and that perhaps Phil will go, a little overlooked. I still think Phil will be popular, but I'm going to ride that course history, and I think he'll still be my main guy in this range.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Like, I'm not afraid to play Phil. He's not going to get, no one in this range is going to get crazy popular. I mean, he could get close to 20% or something like that, but I like him. He's going to be in my GPPs. It scares me to say you could play Phil in cash, but I think in that range, he's probably your cash play, just looking off course history. I mean, stats as well, but recent form, course history combined, he's definitely looks the best. He looks almost like a Rory.
Yeah.
Without a win. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So,
yeah.
All right. Well,
bigger calves, but
maybe we haven't seen Rory really. He hasn't really been showing them off. All right. So hopping down to the 8K range, there's not a ton of guys that I love down here. Surprisingly, it gets weird. Like you mentioned, Stars and Scrubs versus Balanced. I can see merit to both. I don't think many people will go Stars and Scrubs just because there's not a lot of name value in the 6K range. I think most guys will start with a Rory or a Ricky Fowler or Justin Rose, build out their lineup, and then realize that I have 6,600 left. Let me just take Rory off, and I'll go down to Paul Casey, and all of a sudden now I'm back up to 7,900 or something like that. So I think guys will try to be balanced. And for me in the 8K range, I don't really like a ton of these guys. I don't see a big floor for many of them, and I don't see a really high ceiling either. The only one that I'm interested to play, and I have a feeling his ownership will be lower than it has been of late, and that's Mr. Jason Kokrak. Obviously, statistically, grades out great. I think the course history, similar to, was it like a couple weeks ago, he was maybe, was it the Valero, I think? His course history wasn't great, and his stats superseded that. And most people didn't jump on the train because they thought, oh, well, this golf course isn't good for him. If you're playing good, course history can go out the window pretty quick. And he's been playing good at a different level for a while. It's not just he played good at one event and then he's going back to a course he hasn't played well at. And he hasn't played poorly here, but he really hasn't popped. Like, I just have a feeling he's not going to be as easy to click as he has been in prior weeks with weaker fields. So Jason Kokrak is by far my favorite in the 8K range. I'm really not interested in Sungjae. It's a longer golf course. It's been proven he has not played well in longer golf courses. The only guy that I have interest in is down at the very low end, and that's Keegan and Luke List. As crazy as that sounds, but those are the two guys that I would rather play over an Aaron Wise, a Vegas, even Ben On. I could get behind a little Ben On, but not crazy. So those three guys there are really all I'm focusing on in the 8K range.
Can we just talk about why Johnny Vegas is 8,200? Why is he even in this range? I looked at his course history. I mean, he's had a string of, solid play, like, T20s and maybe dropping a T10 in there. But his course history here is not great. I sort of did a double take when I saw him with the likes of some of these other guys. But anyways, I've got a little bit of interest in Wise. I think that driving the ball is one of his strengths, and he sort of flexed that last year with that T2 that he had, him and Watney. And 17th at the Masters. Yeah, was that his first time out at the Masters?
Johnny Vegas?
No, Aaron Wise.
Oh, Aaron Wise, yeah.
So I mean, that's a heck of a finish for first timer at the Masters, and he started off really really rough, 3 missed cuts, and then he had a T19 at WGC Mexico, but certainly that was a limited field, and then really outside of this 17th at the Masters, he hasn't done all that much, but I could see a little bit of merit going with Aaron Wise. And then, like you said, Kokrak, he was one of the guys that stood out to me. I also saw that Lucas Glover, just below him, has got some pretty solid course history. It's certainly extensive. He's played the course a number of times, and he actually won it in 2011. You could start going back really far. I don't know if it's worth taking that old of a course history into account, but looking at his overall sort of portfolio for this course, he seems to play it fairly well. He finished 14th at the Texas Open, and then 13th at the Valspar. So, miscut, and then 10th at the API, 4th at the Honda. I mean, I could get on some Lucas Glover. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't like him on this golf course. He has a couple good finishes, but it's mostly up and down. He's just so streaky. And 8,500, I'd rather just pay up to Kokrak, who's been playing better.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think all these guys are viable in GPPs for the most part. It's like one that I keep trying to go back to is Charles Howe. He was a guy we brought up probably a month ago, where he's kind of in that Kokrak category where he's been playing better, more consistently, and some of his recent course history on some courses have been he's been exceeding expectations, and this one might be one of those types. He'll certainly fly under the radar, I have to imagine. I mean, cash games people probably like to hang out here with Kokrak, Glover, Charles Howe. It seems like people like to hang out in the 8K range for cash, but GPPs, Charles Howe's is probably going to be, I would definitely check ownership on these guys in the 8K range, because to me, Charles Howe actually grades out the worst for me. There's only, all the other guys, though, are literally one after another. So it could be a toss-up, and just look at ownership, honestly, in GPPs, depending on how many you're building. So keep that in mind as well. So with that, we can hop down to the 7K range if you want to. I mean, mine's kind of spread out through the 7K range. I know there's a ton of guys from 7,900 down to 7K, but go ahead and give me your kind of top couple guys, 2 or 3 that you really like here.
So probably my favorite in this range is Keith Mitchell at 7,800. I think we're seeing a different player than we have. I don't know if it's maturity or just getting rounds under his belt. That win, did he win API? Is that the one he won?
No, he won a Honda. He finished pretty good in API though.
I just like Keith Mitchell. He's known as a bomber, I guess you could say. So not really worried about length here. He did play the event last year, his first time, and made the cut, finished 34th. I don't mind that play at all. One guy that I do have some interest in, though, just below him is, where is he at? Not just below him, but a little bit further down at 7,500 is Trey Mullinax, another guy also known as a really long hitter. Mullinax with some surprising finishes in his last 2 or 3 events. Finished 16th at the Heritage. He sort of NDF at the Texas Open. Sort of a string of not really great play. He started out the season pretty well. I could see him as definitely a GPP play based off of those few things. Not really good course history here. Missed the cut last year by a couple strokes, but I don't mind that play at all. A couple other guys, and I'll just hit on them briefly. I like Joel Damon at 7,600. Nick Watney, again, with the T2 last year, a little bit longer of a hitter, also at 7,600. Some guys normally that we would flock to. Fratelli is sort of my guilty pleasure to just play him whenever he plays, but his form has not really backed that up for me. Neiman also at that same price. I just don't think I can get on that. Going down a little bit further, I like Russell Henley at 7,300. And so I think I passed over him, sorry. Kevin Streelman at 7,700 is another guy that I've got a little bit of interest in. Let me look at his course history really quick. Missed the cut, let's see, last 2 times out at this course, but prior to that, he's had 2 top 10s, 3 T14s or better in 3 years prior to those missed cuts. Finished 6th at the Heritage, 6th at the Texas Open. Give me a little interest in Streelman there at 7,700.
Yeah, I'm with you there on Mullinax, and you mentioned Joel Damon briefly. I like both of them. Guys like Watney, I think people will look at that finish last year, and he's playing. I mean, Watney's playing pretty bad. He's definitely not someone that's going to be on my list at all. So I just assume the second place pops out to people thinking they could get value at 7,600. But I would much rather play Damon. Is playing well coming into the event, and even at the Zurich last week, like coming out to a strong lead with or going off to a fast start with his partner Brandon Harkins is good news. So going down below that, I had to sneeze. Sorry, not below that, just above that. You mentioned Keith Mitchell. I'm on board with Keith Mitchell, 7,800. I think I agree with you. I think he is becoming more of a consistent player. Obviously, a standout at Georgia and coming out with his win, getting out of the web.com to the PGA Tour, and then winning at the Honda this year, and then bouncing right back at the API with a good finish. I like Keith Mitchell quite a bit. I think this is a good golf course for him. He's plenty long enough, and I like what I've seen from him this entire season, really. So 7,800, I don't see any reason why not to play him. The one guy that's kind of interesting to me, and really, I think I tried to jump on him earlier in the season when he came back from injury. He finally had a decent showing a couple weeks ago and kind of faded. But Daniel Berger, I feel like maybe he's finally getting back to being healthy. So his course history is 55th last year, 17th 3 years ago, and 28th 4 years ago. So not crazy great, but I feel like now's the time basically to ride a Daniel Berger under-owned 7,700, a guy that's typically like 9K or mid-8s. Mm-hmm. I think he's finally getting over the injury that he's had for the last year, probably 10, 12 months. So Daniel Berger's a guy that I think is going to be in a lot of my GPPs is pretty sneaky. And I haven't checked pricing yet on FanDuel, but usually I try to pick out one of these guys that's severely mispriced between one side or the other, and that's where you can kind of build value. And like you mentioned, stars and scrubs. Like if Daniel Berger is almost the same price on FanDuel, we'll say he's 8K on FanDuel. Like, dang, man, you could pick him, and he's got win equity a little bit, and then you could really throw in, a Rory, Jason Day, Ricky Fowler together, and then throw in like one guy like Keith Mitchell or something. All of a sudden, you have a really good Stars and Scrubs lineup that's really not even that scrubby. So I do like to look at that. Outside of that, the very low end I'm not terribly thrilled with. It scares me more or less. Like I just don't see anyone that stands out to me as a strong play. The one that I want to play, and I guess is also scary. Michael Thompson, 7,400, I think is, that could be just butchery there, but I don't know. He grades out really well for me. A lot of the key stats as far as hitting fairways, a lot of greens, and a lot of that's carried over from a really strong stretch early in the season, but you can't really find a ton of strong value down here. And I'm, again, like, you want to mix in a little bit of distance, and he's long enough. I think Michael Thompson's okay at 7,400 to get behind.
It's interesting. I hadn't looked at him any. Berger, by the way, is 9,300 on FanDuel.
Yeah, so it's about the same value. Pretty close.
Yeah.
It's actually still a little cheap. He's probably right at 8K. That'd be like a DK price of 8K, so pretty close.
What was his injury? Was it a wrist?
Yeah. Yep.
My only concern with him, and I imagine that's why he hasn't been playing as much, but this is super random, but I follow him on Instagram, and I just feel like, certain people go about their business a certain way, but all I see from him is just being on the boat all the time and, taking it easy. And, that, take it for what it's worth, certainly, but, he could pop at any point in time. We've seen his ability before, but I think for me, I just need to see something a bit more before I jump on that, and that might be the case. I might miss out if I do that, but I don't think I have the interest in Berger. I don't think he's in my player pool.
Yeah, can't follow you there. It's definitely a play that you're trying to pick out not a peak, but a uptick in performance, not so much a wait until he plays. So
yeah,
a lot of that has to do with DFS. I mean, you can't really wait on a lot of these guys to play. Like Jason Kokrak 3 months ago was the time to play him. Now it's starting to get a little thin, and you're just trying to pick apart ownership leverage where you can. So let's go ahead and hop down into the 6K range. And there's really honestly not a ton of guys that jump off the page to me, but any that stand out to you, and I'll kind of give my final thoughts through the 6K range of guys that you can potentially pair with a Stars and Scrubs lineup if that's the way you want to go.
Oh man, as I go through the sixes, I struggle to even throw some names out there. I will say, let's see, Vaughn Taylor.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys I got.
He was probably the one that stood out most to me, and he's really had some up and down form coming into this event. Certainly, I think he started out strong. The Desert Classic with a T10, a T10 at Genesis. I think his best finish within the last 5 or 6 tournaments was an 18th at the Valspar. He's got some sustained course history here, but it isn't that great. So certainly he might be worth a flyer, but I would certainly temper expectations rolling with Mr. Vaughn Taylor. As far as some other guys, let's see here. Chris Kirk at 6,800. I think that we have seen he had an event recently where he was not. Never mind, that was a long time ago. I think this is just a good example of how far we're kind of stretching to pick guys out in this range, which, like we said earlier, makes Stars and Scrubs really difficult. I feel bad because I've only thrown one name out here, but
Well, that's fine. I mean, that's you don't like anyone down here, and you don't like anyone down here. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'll toss it over to you, and as I just look through some other guys, and maybe I'll drop off a couple others.
No, I mean that's fine. I mean, a lot of times, man, there's nothing to work with. You just gotta play. You can't just force yourself to play anyone down here either.
Yeah, for sure.
So Vaughn Taylor, I'm behind. Course history looks a little suspect. His stats look good for recent form. So he's a guy that I'm not going to be overweight by any means, but he's a guy that's in my player pool currently. The two other ones that I'm eyeballing, Sepp Straka is a guy that I like on a golf course where he can hit driver and not be too afraid of rough or a ton of trees. So Sepp Straka, 6,500, I like a decent bit. And the other one just above him is Harold Varner III. Love me some Harold Varner III this week. He's long. Man. He's long. He's obviously went to Coastal Carolina.
ECU. ECU.
Eastern Carolina, sorry.
Yeah.
Dustin Johnson went to Coastal Carolina. My bad.
Yes.
But yeah, I think Harold Varner is finally getting a little bit of an uptick in some of his results. He's actually done decent at this event. Nothing crazy good, nothing terrible. His one MO, which again is probably an afterthought for me with approach shots, like green regulation coming in is key, but looking at his results here, he's always struggled with approach, and he's actually over the last year started to have stretches of gaining a lot of strokes on approach over the field. So off the tee doesn't seem to be a problem for him, which is good. Like a guy down here, if he doesn't struggle off the tee, he should be able to hit enough greens to make the cut. That basically solves half the puzzle right there. So I'm down with some Harold Varner III. And the only other guy that I will mention, and mainly to our boy Workacut in the chat, is Mr. Max Homa. 6,600. Okay results, really up and down. So this is definitely a GPP play. He's not going to be someone I would throw into a cash lineup if I was playing, pairing someone with Rory. But yeah, he's got the upside for me for a top 15. I don't know. I haven't heard from Axis or Skylar as far as their betting card for top 5s or top 10s. But like for me, Max Homa is a guy that has repeatedly popped for close to first round leads and coming in pretty close to. I mean, he's done a couple top 20s and get a top 10. At 18-1 would be pretty nice. So yeah. Max Homa is probably the last one I'll mention here.
Okay. So I did see one other guy that I wouldn't mind playing, and that's Bo Hostler, just right at, I believe he's 6,900. Finished his lone time out at this event last year, made the cut, finished 34th. He did miss his most recent cut at the Heritage, but prior to that, finished 36th at the Texas Open. He does have a T15 on the year at the Genesis, but that was some time ago. Hostler is certainly known for his putter. And, in a field where, not to say that we're weighing putting significantly more than we would at any other event, I think it has shown that, putting is where, at this course at least, where you can look to gain at least, a stroke and a half, maybe 2 on the field if you're really rolling it well. I think we spoke to that earlier. Just the sheer difficulty of the course, par 5s is where you're going to be able to do your most damage. Averaging 3 birdies a round is the norm. I don't mind Bo Hostler at 6,900.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as far as, you're not picking a guy because he's known to be a good putter, but when you look through, like if you're ever unsure about what can set someone apart with this golf course, is you pick the group that most likely is the most closely related, skill level, and that's like the 10K and up range. And when you look at guys that have played well here, like Jason Day and Rory, what's the common denominator between them and guys that are almost the same skill level and that have putted and that have played poorly? Like talk about a Webb Simpson. It's the putter. Same with Hideki, kind of. So looking just through that, as soon as you told me, Bo Hoster, and I started thinking about how hot he can get with the putter. He's obviously a longer player, qualified for the U.S. Open when he was like 15 years old, so he can play. But, man, if he can get the putter going, this is a good golf course for him, assuming the rough's down. So, yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, man. That is it. I think I didn't see him. He didn't show up in my spreadsheet anyways. But Chip McDaniel Monday qualified. So DraftKings has been adding some of these guys late to the field, like as far as salaries go. So I don't know if he'll be added. If they do add him and he's like min price, he'll be a guy that I would look to. He was someone I played a couple weeks ago and barely made the cut and maybe finished last after making the cut. But has some really low rounds. Like today for the Monday qualifier, if I'm not misremembering this, but I think he shot 65, which normally doesn't qualify for a Monday. Usually it's like 63, but the next best was 68, and there was 3 guys at 68 that qualified. So like he beat those guys that are PGA Tour players by 3 shots. So that's pretty impressive to me. Usually they're all bunched up. So to beat basically flipped. All these guys have status on the PGA Tour. Usually they get on the wrong side of the wave, but yeah, to beat them by 3 shots is pretty impressive. So if they do add him, I would keep him in mind.
He has been added.
Was he? Okay. Was he priced at?
Yeah, he was. 6,400.
Okay. Yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah. I'll be playing him. All right, man. Let's get the guys out of here. We do have the listener league up. You can find the link in the description of the podcast or the video if you're watching this on YouTube. Of course, if you do like the show, Axel will be back next week as we break down the next event, getting ready for the PGA Championship. You can leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. That always helps us out. And of course, you can find the rolling report and all of our stat tools at fantasygolfbag.com. And with that, we'll get you guys out of here. Definitely stop by the site, find us, and if you have any questions, reach out to us on Twitter. You can find me at Red Kachik, and you can find Jacob at JKRayASU. For Jacob, I'm Drew. Good luck with your events this week, and we'll see you on Wednesday night for the live stream. See ya.